What's up, guys? So basically it is Tuesday, March 15th today. We wrapped up the Gentleman set yesterday, so that was Monday the 14th, 2016. I'm anticipating a really great final product. I worked on it with Ben Griffin. This is the fourth project that we've officially worked on together. There's a treatment and a storyline that I wrote, the record, of course, which I wrote all myself, and I recorded it, as always, with my brother and my executive producer, Jade, who also executive produced the Transgressions album. So just to get some of those details out of the way, I'm about to be leaving LA, headed back for New York, but I did want to clarify and touch on a few things about the Gentleman record, just so that there are no misconceptions and just to kind of clear the air about it. I think the thing is that it's too easy today for people to imagine that rap or hip-hop, because of the state that it's in, when they hear a record like Gentleman sort of in the mix of everything else that's out there in the landscape, it's very difficult to begin to distinguish who's doing what's authentic, what's coming with the thought behind it, and what's not. So the record Gentleman isn't some vapid, insipid thing that just sort of came to be as a product of misogyny or sexism, which I'll most likely be accused for. If anything, the record is really written as a feminist anthem in a certain way, which I don't know that most people would necessarily see, but I have this really staunch posture in not wanting to ever condescend my audience, and I place a lot of faith in what people's ability will be, and I don't necessarily think about commonplace, and I don't think about the masses, but I think that if the few selective listeners who choose to interpret my music in the right way and to really listen to the lyrics will understand the record. So the idea and the posture behind it is, I am someone who's a little bit astringent sometimes against not necessarily against women, but in romantic relationships, which for me as a heterosexual male always includes a woman. So it's not that I'm sort of just generalizing or segregating and saying that all women are a certain way. It's just that what the record means is that there's an experience that I have, an experiential quality which has sort of been a conflicted one for me in my personal limited experience. And I'm somebody who places his artwork above all of the things, including, honestly, romantic relationships at this particular juncture in time. So what does that mean? What does that really mean, essentially? It means that I'm astringent towards women because I feel as if any prolonged or dedicated interest in one particular woman will create a lack of focus on my work. So again, it's nothing against women, it's just that as a heterosexual man, not wanting to place myself in a romantic, emotionally contaminated space, I have certain distancing issues, or I like to create a certain amount of space for myself as an artist. The other thing is that my life is a certain way, and it's unapologetically so. And there are a lot of things that I come with, and there is sort of like all these moving parts which entail my life. There are these, everything is sort of shines a certain way, and it's very hard for me to hide it with Instagram, with public life, and with just sort of always being, as I said, unapologetically honest and not making an attempt to sort of descend myself. I understand that I look like an opportunity. And I think what the record is about, it's about dealing with being somebody in sort of a very, very singular circumstance where I'm somebody who has everything. There's nothing that I could ever imagine or want that I don't have access to. And I'm blessed and I'm fortunate to be in that position. But at the end of the day, the only thing I really ultimately care about is bringing artistic labor to fruition. I think about posterity. I think about leaving something for the future of mankind. I think about my work becoming the property of mankind. All else for me is really sort of secondary. And, I think people will look at me as a white rapper. I think they'll look at my surroundings, and I think that they're going to begin to ask themselves, is this really the real thing? He had nothing to lose, and that's the mentality. Well, I would challenge that conception entirely, because I actually have everything to lose. I sacrificed a certain lifestyle that could have been even more ridiculous, or just the time to live a certain way, and I place myself in the studio every day, and I write, and I read, and I write songs, and I write academic essays, and I write poetry, and I read literature, and I live a life just consuming and creating art. So at the end of the day, if you really want to know who Akillezz is, all this other stuff is fun. All this other stuff is entertainment. All of it is material. The majority of it means next to nothing to me. And that's the honest truth, because I look at whatever I have as how do I use these resources to create something greater? So I wake up every day, I look at my two hands. I look at what's immediately available to me, and I say, how do I grow these resources, or how do I apply them in a way where I can create something that is not only a sort of anxiety, not the pathological kind of anxiety, but this burning anxiety in me to create, not for myself, not for my family, but to leave something for the general public. And I understand that because what I do is sort of limited, it won't necessarily be available to the entire general public, but from those select few, as I mentioned before, who are choosing to follow me, give me the benefit of the doubt, what can they glean from it? So back to the Gentleman record, now that you sort of understand the whole posture of who I am as a person, the whole posture of who I am as a thinker. What am I doing in effect? When I wrote the record Gentleman, and when we're shooting the video, I'm depriving myself of the title of being a gentleman. It's almost paradoxical, right? Because if a woman in today's society is promiscuous, she gets called a slut or she gets called a whore. But if a guy is equally promiscuous on the other end of the spectrum with a plethora of women, that guy is labeled a boss, or he's a player, or he's somebody that you want to be. So there's a positive connotation because of a male chauvinistic society that is geared certainly in man's favor. So what I'm saying is, in the last record of the song, who makes it wet and nasty, makes you call him daddy, makes you feel the thing you've never ever felt before. They say that I'm a gentleman but won't excuse the whore. So what I'm saying is society is labeling me a gentleman. After everything I just previously described on the record, I get to walk away and be the gentleman. But society is saying that she's the whore. So what I'm saying is, if I'm going to call a woman a whore or a slut, I'm prepared to call myself the same thing. I'm prepared to descend from the title of being a gentleman. I'm prepared to sort of challenge the very skewed societal conception right now. And ultimately, I think it's a success in the record for anybody who's willing to see it. Or at the end of the day, if I am in fact a gentleman, the way the title suggests, then she has the right to do everything that we've done together in the record as described and still be a lady. You see, so it's one or the other. Either I'm a gentleman and she's a lady, or she's a whore or she's a slut, and I'm prepared to wear that same label, taking nothing away from her. So in the record, I'm descending myself intentionally from the title. It's a falling from grace. We live in this post-lapsarian world today, after the fall of mankind. Well, you know what? It's the fall of womankind as well, right? So we're either all burning in this thing together, or we acknowledge that it's the 21st century and we take a more sort of sexually liberated approach, and we look at this as some healthy thing, that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's the record in a nutshell. I've been called a lot of things. I've been called a sexist. I've been called a misogynist. Frankly, I don't care, because the people that will try to place those labels on me are doing it because they're not willing to grapple in the intellectual conversation. They're not willing to afford somebody the opportunity to explain themselves. So if you just listen to something at face value and you're not the kind of a person that's going to delve further into that material, personally, I really couldn't give a fuck either way. I shouldn't. And honestly, viewers shouldn't as well, because it means nothing. That person isn't somebody who's genuinely concerned with dealing with the issues of sexism. Somebody could slam me or whatever because I used the word bitch. Bitch is gender non-specific. You know, I've heard the most heinous comment in my life. I was called a sexist or a misogynist because of the way that women were objectified in one level, right? So that person totally doesn't understand the treatment, which again, I wrote that treatment in one level, which I shot with Ben Griffin. That is sort of like a hermeneutical sort of an interpretation of sin, of temptation, And of course, the women there were physical manifestations of carnal temptation, so they represented sin. There's cocaine there, there's the snake there. The snake, of course, being Satan. I'm standing on the cocaine, I'm bumping shoulders with these people, but I'm not doing it. The older men were sort of repulsive the way they were engaging with the women in that video. So at the end of the day, people have to understand it's glorifying it, and as attractive as it is, it's almost equally repulsive. It's repelling, it pushes you away. And so I think my motive for wanting to sit down and just sort of have this monologue and explain myself a little bit is very much so that people don't get the wrong idea. I'm not one of these other rappers. I'm conscious. I know what I'm writing. There's an intent behind it. It's substantive stuff. You're either going to want to engage with it and you're going to want to give me the consideration that you should afford any artist, period, independent of where they're coming from or on what subjects they're writing, or you're not. If you're not that person, I don't think you would have made it this far in listening to me speak. If you are, I hope that you continue to follow the project. I hope that you enjoy my music. And if it's not something that you can enjoy, I hope that you're at least able to appreciate the artistic merit, the integrity, and the sacrifices of a person that could have been, crashing sports cars and jumping in and out of planes and off of yachts. So at the end of the day, if that's something that makes you feel a certain way, then that's your issue as well, because I live inside of a studio. I live inside the basement of my home. I live with a notepad. I live with a book. I live with my family. I'm not around with many people, of which Jade is a part. And this is what I do every day. So at the end of the day, if people want to say that I'm not hip-hop, that's fine, because then I don't know what it means anymore. Because the interpretation of what I've seen of what hip-hop is totally skewed, right? Does hip-hop not an art form anymore? Is it not people that sort of wake up every day wanting to harvest and create something better for the next generation? Because the forefathers did that for me. When I think of M, when I think of J, when I think of Pac, when I think of Nas, when I think of 50, these are men that inspired me. These are artists, first and foremost, who inspired me. At the end of the day, and they're still active and they continue to inspire me. And so in the wake of their sort of symbolic shadow as they approach that place where, they have these careers which are still active, but you can see the wake because they have that trajectory over time. If I'm somebody or who it gets mentioned in that same breath where the torch gets handed to, it's my responsibility to safeguard hip-hop just like anybody else would, independent of circumstance, independent of race, independent of creed. The point is, are you conscious? Are you sitting and are you thinking before you put the pen to the page? And I'm conscious, and I think about everything that I write. If this didn't help you understand me, I don't think anything will, so we can end it here. Thank you for your time.